What's up, everybody? I'm back again on a Sunday night to talk about this stuff before we get started on a very busy week. I've had a few discussions about the scalping situation for the Nintendo Switch 2 already, and obviously for the most part it's in relation to the stock that's available, the stock that's been sold, and the stock that has yet to be moved. As a matter of fact, you can date back my first discussion on scalping for the Nintendo Switch 2 to way back up until the night of the pre-orders. I actually gave a lot of people some tips about how to make sure they can pre-order a Nintendo Switch 2. I actually shared my own personal experience about how I helped people buy PS5s during the time when scalping was a big deal. You can go back to that video if you're interested in more details, but to make a long story short, I had actually torn my Achilles back in 2021, so I was working from home on my desk and I was very immobile. I'm still working from home, but now I'm a little bit more mobile. I basically started off by helping a few of my friends get a hold of a PlayStation 5 or an Xbox, and then the ball just kept rolling. I helped one person grab it, he told somebody else, they told a different person. Before I knew it, there was like just a whole chain of people where I would get random texts from individuals that I either knew through one of my friends or I didn't even know them at all. They just sent me a message saying, "Hey, I heard you're the guy that can help people get a PlayStation." I never made any actual money off of it, but I made a crap ton in credit card points, and it was just really fun for me. I did it for the thrill more than anything else, and also because I just like helping people. The long and short of it, though, is that I lived like a scalper. I don't know how to use bots, but I figured out all the tricks of how to make sure you can buy something. You just got a screen open on the side, there are just a bunch of tabs, all your information is pre-filled out. You gotta know which Twitter guys to follow who are gonna tell you when there's a drop, and it's pretty much straightforward after that. Once you've done 4 or 5, it becomes very easy. That's why whenever I talk to you guys about the amount of sales that the Nintendo Switch 2 has and how absurd it is to me that it's still available in stores despite the fact that fewer than 2 million have been sold in the United States, I say it based off of personal experiences with the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X. And obviously one of the replies I usually get straight after mentioning that is that this is no longer COVID time, so you can't expect people to have the same type of demand as others did when they were bored at home. Well, first of all, since COVID until now, there have been plenty of things go on sale online that scalpers have eaten right up, so it's not like it was only during the lockdown that this was happening. Second of all, despite the fact that many people were very bored at home, a lot of people were also in a very tough financial position, and they were struggling and still wanted to buy the PlayStation 5, very similar to how many people today are also financially struggling and, well, don't actually want to buy the Switch 2, but some people do. And even beyond that, we had situations with the PlayStation 4 and how long it took to be readily available in stores. We had situations with the Switch. We had situations with the Nintendo Wii. Consoles, historically, have never been easy to grab within the first 2 million that are sold in the United States. We'll just use that as the benchmark. Which is why I found it hilarious that so many people that have never scalped before or never learned how to buy anything and compete with scalpers were able to pre-order their Nintendo Switch 2s. Now, obviously, a lot of those people were scalpers, and that's part of this point of this video. We're going to be getting to that shortly. But I would say with the amount of people that clearly did not buy a PlayStation 5 or did not try to buy anything that was in demand during the height of demand craze, any of those folks that were able to actually pre-order their Nintendo Switch 2s on opening night are a data point to just how unappealing the Nintendo Switch 2 was, or is rather. Largely because of the price, of course. Actually, mainly because of the price. This happened during the pre-orders. This happened during the opening few days of launch. This happened during the days that were following the launch, the weeks even. During a time where each and every person kept insisting that the Switch 2 would 100% remain out of stock from now until Christmas. And obviously they believed that because Nintendo kept saying the same thing. They were like, yo, this is gonna be very hard for you guys to get a hold of. They sent out of stock signs because they also believed those signs would be used from now until Christmas. But those signs ended up being used for like 2 weeks. But it's funny because during all of that time, with how easy it was to get a Nintendo Switch 2, there were so many people that kept insisting that this was a very difficult console to grab. And then it hit me. I realized exactly why so many people actually think the Switch 2 was hard to grab and might even still think it's hard to grab now. There are legitimately people making posts today in the United States saying that they are finding it difficult to buy a Nintendo Switch 2. My friend, it is available on every single website out there, especially in the United States. My guess it's one of two things. Either they're not clicking on shipping, or they're just looking at the store that's available for pickup nearby and they don't realize that they have to click on shipping in order to get it in stock, which again, how can you expect that type of person to compete with a scalper? Or they're looking at the SKU of the Switch 2 that had the sticker slapped onto it with the Mario Kart bundle, or the one that has no Mario Kart bundle altogether, because they don't realize that there are 3 different versions of the Nintendo Switch 2 available on every single website. The base model, the one with the Mario Kart sticker, and the one that just had Mario Kart bundled with it altogether. And the Mario Kart bundle is the one that has never left being in stock, the one without the sticker. And again, when these are the competitors of the Scalpers, it is no wonder that so many people that bought a Nintendo Switch 2 genuinely believed for a long time that this thing was hard to grab, because they still think it's hard to grab in a lot of ways. So if the Nintendo fans that actually genuinely wanted a Nintendo Switch 2 were not the ones who were buying it, then who was buying it? Oh, it must have been the Scalpers. Why wouldn't they? They jump on the website, it's very obvious to them which thing to click in order to make sure they grab it, and then you got these other people that are blindly clicking around being like, hey, this thing says it's not in stock within my vicinity, how do I grab it? To put it simple, Scalpers were buying the Nintendo Switch 2 from the day of the pre-orders up until around July 24th-ish, or July 17th, whenever it was exactly that these things became available online across the entire country and never slipped away. And you know it was available online because everybody was selling them on eBay. Scalpers were scalping the heck out of the Nintendo Switch 2. And I know this because I was keeping tabs on the Scalpers. Nintendo did nothing out of the ordinary to combat the Scalpers. I jokingly made a video before, actually it wasn't a joke, it was dead serious, that the only way Nintendo actually did combat the Scalpers was they overcharged for the Nintendo Switch 2, which caused the profit margins for the Scalpers to be much lower. So Nintendo basically was like, well, hang on a second, if we price this thing at $350, which is realistically where it should be at, and the Scalpers are selling it for over $500, that means that's $200 that we miss out on. So instead they bumped it up to $450, $500, and made it so that Scalpers were making less than $100 on it. And I know, what most of you guys are gonna comment, well, I'd rather Nintendo gets the money than the Scalpers. Yeah, that's fine. I'd probably rather that too, but that's really not relevant to the point. The point is that this whole idea that Nintendo created this genius plan to defeat the Scalpers is blatantly not true. They have been buying and reselling this thing over and over again since the day that it launched. Since the day that it launched up until a month ago. And the only reason it's no longer being scalped is because the margins were so low as it is that as soon as they put a few more consoles out there, even the $50 that the Scalpers were making weren't worth it anymore because the 7 other people that wanted a Nintendo Switch 2 were able to get their hands on one. And legitimately, the reason why I say that the Scalpers were not defeated and the Scalpers were still very much able to grab the Nintendo Switch 2s is number one, just because of how many resellers were trying to flip that thing, even if there was going for a smaller margin. And number two, because their websites actually weren't that much different. Again, I was there in 2020, 2021, and 2022 when the PS5 was still going for a hot minute, or hot 3 years rather. They did nothing differently this time around, and the only people that believe it was actually different are the Nintendo fans because they never tried to buy a PlayStation 5. You know who actually did try to buy a PlayStation 5? Scalpers, and they were able to get a hold of a Nintendo Switch 2 as well. So then I thought about it, and I'm like, wait a sec, Nintendo, this company that went out of their way to talk about how they were going to combat Scalpers by making sure they had so many Switch 2s available, and yet really outside of that very first opening weekend, there was nothing special. After that, it was just coming trickled in just like the rest of the consoles were throughout the past 20 years. And even in the opening weekend, it was like 500,000 people that actually wanted a Switch 2, and then 3 million that showed up the next day to buy it because they were like, oh, I can buy 7 more of these and sell them online. So what exactly did Nintendo do here? Because people were still able to scalp this thing the exact same way that they were able to scalp everything beforehand. Because a few years ago, you also had a limitation of 1 per customer. A few years ago, you also had to make an account. The only thing they might have done differently was the situation in Japan, but I'm talking about the United States. Did anything actually change over here with how they flip it, how they sell it? And no, actually, it was pretty much the same way. We are at less than 2 million units sold. Scalpers were able to buy this thing and flip it to their heart's content. What did Nintendo actually change? Right now, if you go to bestbuy.com, you can put 3 Nintendo Switch 2s in your cart and buy all 3 of those. My friend, that is not combating Scalpers. That is a company trying to get Switch 2s off of their shelves. Like I said, Nintendo made a product so overpriced and unappealing because of that price that even the Scalpers don't even find it worth it anymore. And again, only 2 million people have bought this thing. It had a record-breaking launch, sure, but that still doesn't mean that 2 million people was Nintendo's target. Like, I would say up to 10 million, this thing needs to be flying right off the shelves, and that's just 10 million in the United States, not 10 million worldwide. Based off of how many people bought a Nintendo Switch, and how many people were supposedly excited for the Nintendo Switch 2, it definitely should have not been at 2 million. maybe even 5 million in the United States alone should have been like people jumping over each other to make sure they can grab that. Come on now. But I mean, I realized this after making my last video, and I realized this after the few videos before that as well, where people would frequently come in and comment about the stock and the availability and be like, I don't understand what you're saying, because Nintendo specifically said they were going to make sure they combat scalpers. So having stock and availability is proof that they were able to combat the scalpers. But yet, despite that, this thing was still being scalped, still being sold on eBay, and was still supposedly very hard to grab for people that did not know how to go up against scalpers. Again, Best Buy, Walmart, Costco, they didn't do anything different for the Switch 2 that wasn't already done with previous consoles, previous devices. So if that's the case, why would Nintendo go out and make the statement that they were going to make sure they combated scalpers? And I think I actually figured it out. And I figured it out recently with the amount of times that people have thrown that back in my face. What's the best way for Nintendo, the geniuses of marketing that they are, the brilliant minds that they have in order to make sure they are keeping people at the edges of their seat, the manufacturers of hype that they are? What's the best way for them to overcharge for a device, see the device sit on shelves and not move along, and not have people question why nobody's buying these consoles? And they do it by saying that they're going to have so much availability that they're going to combat scalpers. So now, while most alarm bells should be ringing by the very same people that thought this was going to be sold out from now until December, instead they're going on about how this thing was just defeated by scalpers and Nintendo did a very good job making sure they had enough available. It's actually brilliant. Think about it. They sent out-of-stock signs to the public with the stores to put in front of their stores on the day of their console's launch. Did they do that knowing that there was going to be units in stock available later? Because if that's the case, they did that to manufacture hype, which I was suggesting months ago. Or did they assume that this thing was going to be out of stock right now? Because realistically speaking, they either expected more sales or they expected scalpers would be picking them off the shelves. Whichever way you look at it, there's something wrong. Something doesn't add up. And like I said, the only way for them to make sure that people aren't questioning why this thing is not moving is to predate everything by saying we were going to have enough units available to make sure scalpers do not get their hands on the Nintendo Switch 2. And y'all are eating it right up. Nintendo did not beat the scalpers by any means. Hundreds of thousands of scalpers were able to pick up the Nintendo Switch 2 and flip it. So don't come to me while there is still stock available and tell me that Nintendo expected that right now there would still be Switch 2s available in stores and that it's selling just as well as they predicted it would sell, despite the fact that they shipped out all of these out-of-stock signs and all of the analysts and all of those around the entire world predicted that it would be hard to get a Nintendo Switch 2, at least from now until the end of 2025. There is zero chance Nintendo predicted that right now Switch 2s would be on the shelves in the United States. You guys wondering why I'm still making these videos? This is why I'm still making these videos. Because until I get to the point where I'm like, oh, you know what, I was wrong about this, I'm still gonna be making these videos. And I genuinely thought after the launch of the Nintendo Switch 2 that I wouldn't be making another video for at least another 6 or 7 or 8 months, because during that time, I thought the Switch 2s would be flying off the shelves and I would have nothing to talk about. But it's been such a rocky start for the Nintendo Switch 2, and if Nintendo fans were not frequently shifting the goalposts about what was considered good and what was considered bad, it would be so obvious for the entire world. Again, just to remind everybody, we said 6 to 8 million units were going to be sold in the opening weekend. That's what everybody was predicting. That's what the analysts were saying. That's what all the fans were saying. And they dropped down to half of that within a span of 4 days. They couldn't even sell it on the first day. And since then, they've just been slowly being like, yo, stop the count. This thing is the fastest selling console of all time. It's done. We're no longer having this discussion. Nah, dude, we're still at like, what, 6 million sold in 7 weeks? The Wii U hit 13 million. I have until the end of this year, at least, for this discussion. Something big is going to happen in September. I can say this with certainty. And the reason why something massive has to happen in September is because by the end of September is the end of the next quarter for Nintendo. And they have to find a way to make more sales by the end of September. And they've spent all of August trying to make third parties as appealing as possible. If you go to Nintendo.com right now, the first thing that pops up is Madden. In what world is Madden the first thing that pops up on Nintendo.com? They've been sending out surveys. They're going to Gamescom and showing off just a bunch of third-party titles. The only reason they're going to Gamescom is because they know that Xbox people are going to be watching it and PlayStation people are going to be watching it. Right now, they're just hanging on to third parties for as long as they can. You wonder why you're not getting any first-party information? That's why. It's obvious. But it's not working. And in September, they have to find a way to get people to buy Switch 2s. And they flooded the market with the units available now. That saved them when they weren't hitting that 5 million mark. They're like, let's flood the market so we can sell in more than 5 million units because they couldn't sell through 5 million units. And those units have not sold out. So if they're going to want this quarter to look as good as they need it to look for their shareholders, September is either going to get like the king of all announcements, like a 3D Mario or something, or that might be the day where a price drop hits or some extra bundle hits where they're getting 2 games instead of 1. Either that or they're going to announce another 99 game, because need I remind you that Tetris 99 and F-Zero 99 and all these 99 games always come in before the end of a quarterly report in order to make sure that they inflate the numbers of how many people are subscribed to their service. So yeah, September is going to be very interesting. Anyway, we'll keep an eye on everything. I highly recommend anybody that's a fan of Nintendo to keep their hopes in control, keep their expectations nice and low going into this Gamescom event. I wouldn't want you guys to have your heart broken the same way you had it during the Partner Direct last month. But I guess for now, you can just enjoy playing Drag and Drive. Alright, thank you guys so much for listening, and I will catch you on the next one.